The same thing if you were to hold dumbbells, weights in your arms for the rest of your life. Your arms might stretch a quarter of an inch, maybe even half an inch. But your offspring, your children, will not inherit these long arms. Even Charles Darwin knew that. And then consider this. When this reptile is half reptile and half bird, how in the world is it going to survive? See, when it's half reptile, half bird, it can no longer escape its predators on the ground very well because now it's got feathers. And it can't do its new function of flying, so it just basically becomes food. It becomes extinct at that point. Survival rate is way down. Now, the whole notion of dinosaurs evolving to birds is a claim based not on any real fossil evidence, but strictly on pictures drawn by artists. In 2005 edition of Discover magazine, we find the following statement. In the tree down scenario, tree-climbing dinosaurs jumped to the ground or to other trees, and feathers on their outstretched forelimbs helped extend their fall. Eventually, their descendants became gliders, and then finally they began to flap their wings. Now let me talk about it. I read through this whole article. In this whole article, first of all, they neglected to say how the first feathers evolved from scales. They just took that for granted. No evidence whatsoever. They neglected that whole piece there. They offered no factual evidence for how this happened. There are no examples of living or fossil scales that even remotely resemble a feather. In other words, the whole story was long on fantasy and short on evidence. Folks, great claims require real evidence. See, the evolutionists are desperate today. They're desperate to come up with some evidence for the origin of birds and how flight came about. Now, several years ago, in 1999, National Geographic Society came up with a whole article on the feathered dinosaur called Archaeoraptor. Now, what it turned out to be, after all these colored pictures, several months later, it was discovered the whole thing was a fake. The whole thing was fake. And National Geographic eventually had to admit the whole thing was a fake. Now, when we talk about flight, Stuart Burgess, who has a PhD in engineering design and studied design in nature, makes this statement. Birds are so different from other creatures that there would have to be hundreds of thousands of intermediate forms between birds and land animals if birds had evolved. Now, in order for a bird to change, or a reptile to change into a bird, almost the entire anatomy has to change. See, we just get told this story that they grew feathers and wings, but no, it's more than that. Almost the entire anatomy has to change. We have to have development of feathers, reform of the respiratory system, reform of the skeletal system. We need to get hollow bones. We have to have reform of the digestive system, reform of the nervous system, construction of bills and beaks, mastery of nest building, acquisition of flight, and development of a sound-producing organ. All those things have to develop. Now, Andy McIntosh, who has a PhD in combustion theory, who has studied flight for many, many years, makes this statement. Flight alone, he says, flight alone demolishes any concept of evolution. Then we have Alan Fiducia, who is a world authority on birds, says this about Archaeopteryx. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It is a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble is going to change that. I love that word paleobabble there. Now, only the Bible, when we get down to the flight, how birds came here, the origin of birds, only the Bible, folks, has the answer. And the answer is, birds were created on day 5 of God's wonderful creation.